So we're going to read this and we're going to make sense of it. First of all, the entire layout and structure of these emails is very confusing. They're in weird orders, but the older comment is at the bottom. Okay, so this is an email that Jeff Stein sends to Ariane de Rothschild, and it says, "Hey, I thought you would find it amusing that at a Harvard class on Tiny Mustache Man, they told the story that when he was so poor, he lived in a shelter for the homeless and the destitute. The shelter had been financed by 3 wealthy families. Now, he was destitute, and then there's 2 commas which make it unclear. And so I didn't know if that was supposed to be read like, and that he had been, or that he had been, or that the homeless shelter was financed by 3 wealthy families, Gutmanns, Epsteins, and Rothschilds. Turns out it's accurate. So I thought at first the way that this was reading was that it was Tiny Mustache Man that was financed. Okay. And then there was the response. So that was actually incorrect. It's not. It's the shelter where he was staying. However, this still proves a connection between them. So this means that they did, in some sense, perhaps have some kind of association very early on. I thought you would find it amusing. And then Ariana says, well, whether that as a way to say that generosity is not rewarded or that conspiracy theories still exist is quite pathetic. So Ariana replies by saying Tiny Mustache Man was unthankful for the generosity. And then I think the next one is Jeff Stein saying, or no, actually, I'm not sure who the next one is. The next one I think is her, because this is her, looks like her writing style. Well, I can't really tell. Turns out this is 100% true. Tiny Mustache Man was selling clothes and artwork and living in a shelter funded by Jews. Epstein, Rothschild, Gutmann, no conspiracy. Epstein's were the Vienna bankers. Bought their bank on the ring, hence the still Palais Epstein. Where are you? I'm in bed with your cold. I know it is true, she says, but regularly used to say Rothschild's plan has supported Tiny Mustache Man in mass destruction to gain power. I'm in the Maldives. Also cold since yesterday. Back in Europe on the 3rd. So this is a conversation where they're talking about this theory that the professor at Harvard noted about this early connection. Right. So my misunderstanding was that at the very bottom, it's not really my fault. I'm not trying to just excuse myself. I don't have a problem saying I got something wrong, but the way that the grammar and everything is, it's all just jumbled together. It doesn't make any sense. So there's 2 commas after destitute. Doesn't make any sense. But so, okay. So does that mean that everything that I've argued is false? Actually, no. So let's look at the background to that. Man, I put up so much stuff I can't even find my own posts. All right. So see, I've responded to this somewhere. Let's see. Because all of the Tiny Mustache Man apologists, gaslighters latched onto this. Oh, we got Dyer. He's wrong. No, I'm not wrong. In fact, this is just another detail that actually backs up the theory. Doesn't prove it, but it's another detail showing that, oh, so there's actually an early connection between them that nobody even knew about. So here's what Quigley says. 1059. By that time, almost irresistible of 1953, forces were building up against Mossadegh, since the lack of Soviet interference gave the West full freedom of action. The British, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the World Petroleum Cartel, the American government, and the older Iranian elite, led by the Shah, combined to crush Mossadegh. The chief effort came from the American super secret intelligence agency, the CIA, under the personal direction of Allen Dulles, brother of the Secretary of State. Dulles is a former director of Schroeder Bank in New York, was an old associate of Frank C. Tiarks, a partner in the Schroeder Bank in London since 1902, and a director of the Bank of England in 1912 to 1945, as well as Lazard Brothers Bank and at the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. It will be recalled that Schroeder Bank in Cologne helped to arrange Tiny Mustache Man's accession to power as chancellor in 1933. On top of that, are there more details that shed light on this? So note here we have Schroeder Bank, which was a German bank in New York, but also run by the former director of the Bank of England, who also was the director of Lazard Brothers Bank. And it was Schroeder Bank in Cologne that helped Tiny Mustache Man. In The Old Boys by Burton Hirsch, which we're currently reading, he says, like the ambivalent Wallenbergs, Magneto King Robert Bosch, whose nephew was the principal inside IG Farben, covered quickly once prospects darkened. I had official information, Dulles would say, which I subsequently confirmed that Robert Bosch Company was used by Gordeler as a cover for his activities in connection with the organization of German plots against Tiny Mustache Man. On official Reich passes, one heir to the vast Good Hope industrial empire, Alfred Haniel importuned Dulles in Bern repeatedly. Dulles's work at Schroeder Bank was appreciated, as was his closest to Thomas McKittrick, Long Allen legal client and current president of the Bank for International Settlements. The Bank for International Settlements was originally a creature of German interests with Hjalmar Schacht to set up offload reparations and responsibilities, and through the many years an invaluable clearinghouse for the Reich and its prizes across Europe. Now, this is the earliest stage of the Bank for International Settlements. That's not all that it is. The BIS, as we're going to see, is much more important, and it's not only a German Reich bank. So next, we're going to look at what Anthony Sutton says in his chapter on the Bank for International Settlements. And you're going to notice that this is really perhaps the central point. This is the key point which a lot of this hinges on. And a lot of the people, of course, arguing with me and what they don't have no idea what the BIS even is, right? It makes up an important section of Quigley's book. And so we're going to look at Sutton, who had read Quigley's book, and then tacks on new information to what Quigley wrote in Wall Street and the Rise of Tiny Mustache Man. This is not very long. It's very brief. I'm going to read this and you'll see what I'm getting at. The interplay of ideas and cooperations between Hjalmar Schacht, who we just saw, and Owen Young and J.P. Morgan interests in New York was the only one facet of a vast, ambitious system of cooperation, of international alliances for world control. As Dr. Carroll Quigley states, this system was nothing less than the creation of a world financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. So remember, Quigley is not a conspiracy person. He's an apologist for this system and for the establishment as a CFR historian and archivist. This feudal system worked in the 1920s as it works today through the medium of private central banks in each country who control the national money supply of individual economies. In the 1920s and 30s, the New York Federal Reserve System, the Bank of England, the Reichsbank in Germany, and the Bank of France also more or less influence the political apparatus of their respective countries independently through the control of the money supply and through the creation of the monetary environment. Now, keep all this in mind because we're actually going to see Jeff Stein McEffery himself admit all this as well as an insider. More direct influence was realized by supplying political funds to or withdrawing support from politicians and political parties. In other words, the bankers are above the politics, according to Quigley and Professor Sutton. In the United States, for example, President Hoover blamed his 1932 defeat on the withdrawal of Wall Street support and their changing alliance to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was, of course, a banker candidate. Politicians amenable to the objectives of finance capital and academics prolific with the ideas for world control use the international bankers. They are kept in line with a system of rewards and penalties. In the early 1930s, the guiding vehicle for this system of financial and political control was called by Quigley the apex of the system, and by which he meant the Bank for International Settlements. This was based in Basel, Switzerland. The BIS is the apex, and it continued its work throughout World War II as the medium through which the bankers, who were apparently not actually at war with each other, continued mutually beneficial exchanges of ideas, information, and planning for a post-war world. As one writer has observed, war made no difference to the international banking clique. He cites Quigley. I'm going to summarize what he says. One of the key figures was Thomas McKittrick, who is one of the early heads of the Bank for National Settlements, and also I think he comes out of the CIA, which is interesting because in the Mission Impossible series, McKittrick is the villain, one of the villains. The directors of the bank in the BIS, in their respective countries, had no contact with the personnel of the bank. It is alleged, however, that Hjalmar Schacht, the president of the Reichsbank, kept a personal representative in Basel throughout that entire period. So there's something above Tiny Mustache Man in Basel at the BIS that's a big part of what's in the background of this. And we're going to find out some of the possible entities and people that might actually be funding Tiny Mustache Man from this super secret bank. This bank, by the way, is similar to the bank, the Vatican Bank, because it operates outside of international purview. It's its own sort of city-state. It has its own laws and rules and police, kind of like the Vatican or DC, right? The BIS is its own little city-state. And that's because it is the central bank of central banks. And it is not public, it is private. I mean, just think how silly it would be. Oh, it's not a private bank. Oh, it's not a private bank? Okay, what country is the BIS? That's not a country. Oh, well, if it's not a country, then who's it? Who runs it? Who owns the shares? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Interesting. Guys, if you would hit like and share, and if you want to support the stream, you can do so through Super Chats. Super Chats are done right there through Streamlabs. We're about to get to the Epstein stuff, but I want to cover this because it's fascinating. Sutton ends this section by saying, such were the meetings of the Bank for International Settlements that they were more secret than any Royal Arch Masonry meeting or any Rosicrucian Order meeting. The central bankers at the apex of control, they were so intrigued by contemporary journalists that although they rarely and briefly penetrated behind the lines of this secrecy, nobody really knew or figured out who was running it and who had the shares. So, international secret banks that are the bank above the Federal Reserve banks. It's the Federal Reserve of the Federal Reserves.